Hey y'all, Michelle Raza here with Finding Yourself SATX Life Coaching, helping you find your best self since 2017. Today's video, we're going to start covering Lindsay Gibson's new work, Self-Care for Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. I'm super excited to bring you this work and just wanted to today give you a refresher on what EIPs are. Before we get started on that, let's announce this video's raffle winner. Amber Dawson, if you're watching, please contact me to get your free digital suite life coaching package from Finding Yourself SATX Life Coaching. You can find my contact information at www.findingyourselfsatx.com. And y'all, if you're watching today, don't forget to enter this video's raffle. We give away a free digital coaching package every 2 weeks, and I've also slashed my prices. So now you can start your journey for 99 cents. Please check it out. All right, without further ado, we're going to just cover a little bit over Dr. Gibson's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. We have an entire playlist covering this book pretty in depth, along with her book called Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents. So many of you may be asking yourself, what is an emotionally immature parent or an emotionally immature person, which Dr. Gibson calls EIP? An EIP is someone who invalidates your inner world. And what that means is when you were a child and you needed to be nurtured and supported, you were faced with a lot of criticism and contempt instead. It might have just been, and Dr. Gibson breaks it down, it might have just been, or most likely it is, the person was too involved in their own world to be able to give you the time and attention that you needed in order to flourish. What happens in your adult life when you grew up with EIPs is that you have very little self-worth. You don't have a springboard from which to jump and conquer the world. It's much harder for you to find success. Now, Dr. Gibson breaks out EIPs into 4 different categories. She talks about the emotional parent. This is someone who's very unstable, often depressed. There's a real reason why they can't be there for you, but that person cannot and usually does not validate your inner world. These people instill feelings of instability and anxiety in their children. In all cases, and especially in this one, the child becomes the parent. The child has to take on a lot of responsibility that they normally wouldn't have to take on and parent their own parent because that person is very emotional and unstable. She talks about the driven parent. The driven parent stays busy trying to perfect everything and everyone else, and they usually have their children involved in a lot of activities, but typically don't ever really stop to ask those children if they're even interested in those activities. So think the parent who said, I played baseball, so you play baseball. I played this musical instrument, so you play this musical instrument. They keep your schedule so busy going from thing to thing to thing. Maybe they're PTA parents involved in church and just very involved in work. And the child doesn't really get a say in whether they actually enjoy any of these myriad activities that they're going to. It could be really good things like volunteering, and you're forced to go volunteer every weekend. But if your parent never stopped to ask you whether you enjoyed any of these activities or asked you, about what your hopes and dreams were, maybe you weren't into baseball, maybe your thing was soccer or volleyball, but they never stopped to ask you that because they liked baseball, so you had to do baseball. Or maybe you weren't into any of that at all and you were into something completely different from them, but they didn't have time to stop and see that and nurture that and let you be your own person. There's a lot of what Dr. Gibson calls enmeshment here, which is the child is expected to support the parent and have the same interest as the parent, and the parent doesn't take the time to stop and see that this little human being is their own person and can have likes and dislikes completely different from the parent, and that's okay. Dr. Gibson then talks about the passive parent. The passive parent is one who avoids dealing with anything unpleasant or upsetting. Oftentimes you will see either a driven or rejecting paired with a passive. And so in a typical situation that is very stereotypical, and I apologize if this offends anyone, But if you have the example of the father who goes to work, comes home grumpy, needs a couple drinks, and then basically has no interest in his children, and then you have the mom who is maybe coddling or walking on eggshells around the father. Maybe there's a situation of domestic violence there, and it's essentially whatever your father says. Mom, can I do this? It's up to your father, whatever your father says. That's the passive parent. Dr. Gibson has an example in her book, which was very interesting, and it was actually an abusive mother and a passive father. And the person in therapy that was talking to Dr. Gibson, because she's an active practicing therapist up in Virginia, she said that while her mom was yelling at her and hitting her, she heard her father banging pots and pans in the kitchen. And she somehow took that to be that her dad was on her side or supportive for her, when in reality, the father was just a passive parent, not willing to intervene on the abuse that was happening. And you do see that a lot. A situation, if you grew up with a passive parent, is that it's again, you're parenting the parent. So not with the driven parent, but with the passive and the emotional, the child has to parent the parent, and they don't feel like they have someone to rely on. Instead, the parent relies on them, which in the end it is. Once you're an adult, right, your parents rely on you, you rely on them. But as a child, you needed that support that you didn't have. And the last one that Dr. Gibson talks about is the rejecting parent. The rejecting parent is withdrawn, dismissive, and derogatory. The rejecting parent, it seems to be, never even wanted children in the first place. And it makes you wonder how someone could treat you so badly, and it makes you question your self-worth. Why am I here? They don't want me. Why am I here? For the driven parent, you're not worth anything unless you're doing what they want you to do. For the rejecting parent, you're just not worth anything. For the passive parent, you don't feel like you can rely on them and you have to parent them. And for the emotional parent, this may be more situations where they have no control over it because of maybe a mental health issue. But as a child, you're still having to parent your parent. In all cases, your inner world was invalidated, and you don't have that healthy springboard from which to jump and be successful in the world. If you would like, we're going to cover self-care for emotionally immature parents, but if you would like, go back into the playlist and look at adult children of emotionally immature parents, recovering from emotionally immature parents. I posted a ton of videos on that. At one point, I was recording every single day. Make sure that you enter this week's raffle. Really, really happy to be giving away my coaching packages. If it helps you all, it helps me. Likes and subscribes don't cost you anything, so please do that if you can. And for 99 cents, you can begin your journey today. Thanks y'all for hanging out with me. I hope you have a beautiful day. Take care.